Thank you. Those of you who are newer to the series don't know this, but Dries Martin was, in fact, a part of the Ghost Town poetry community, and we really enjoyed hearing what she had to bring when she did. And we all miss her, and we dedicated our second anthology from the series to her. So I'd like to invite those of you who knew her and those of you who didn't to raise a glass to Dries at this moment and have a drink with me in her honor. Yeah, we miss her too, Jim. Oh yes, I almost forgot. Before we bring up the feature, those folks that are standing in the back, there are definitely some empty chairs up here, so I invite you now to come. Raise your hand if you've got an empty chair next to you so they'll know where to go. Yeah, so there's some in the front row, there's also some close to the front, wherever you're comfortable, but you will be more comfortable, I'm sure, sitting down probably.
John?
And if you prefer to stand, we're not going to make you sit. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for being patient and helpful too. Okay, and I would like to invite Joseph to come up. We're really happy that he came all the way down from Longview, and one of the things that's kind of exciting about Joseph Green, other than his poetry, is that he is a letterpress printer, and that is something that is a huge part of the poetry history, and we're really happy to have him here and happy that he was able to make the drive as well. Please welcome Joseph Green.
Thank you, and thanks, Christopher. There we go. I'm involved with a group of people in Portland we're all printers, but we're making metal type at the C.C. Stern Type Foundry in North Portland. Just across the river, actually. If you go across the river and then take the MLK exit and head toward town and get off on North Vancouver, we're right near there, on North Vancouver. And there's some brochures up here about the foundry, and please, if you're interested, take one. The foundry is named for C. Christopher Stern, who was one of the best letterpress printers I've ever met. He was a mentor to me. His widow, Jules Fay, has also been a mentor to me as a printer. Chris died in 2006. He was a year younger than me, so it was way too soon. And Jules didn't know what to do with his foundry equipment, and so a group of his friends got together and bought it. Some of the people involved were in Seattle, but most of them were in Portland. And so the Seattle people dropped out eventually, and we loaded it all into a semi-trailer and moved it to Portland. It lived in the semi-trailer for about 2 years. And 5 years ago, we got located on North Vancouver. So a week from Saturday, on the 19th, we're having our 5th anniversary celebration, open house. If you're interested at all, that'll be a great day to stop by. We'll have machines running. We'll be doing hand casting. We've got a hand mold where you pour the hot metal into the mold, and it's the way it was cast from Gutenberg's time up until the middle of the 19th century when the automatic casting machine was invented. And we've got a couple of machines in rough stages of restoration, and a couple of machines that are really operating quite well, and I think you'll find it interesting. It's an exciting place to stop in. We're all volunteers, so we're really only open one part of one day a month, the third Saturday of each month from 11 to 3. It feels like nothing, really, it feels like nothing. But we do put in more time there than that, but it's all working time, and we're all pretty dirty when that's going on. So stop in. It's a good thing. I've also brought some little bookmarks from my press, the P's and Q's press, They're printed on one of my presses, and they're free. So if you want to pick up a little piece of letterpress printing, and it's got my website on it, so you can see some of the poetry broadsides that my wife Marquita and I do online, and I mean you can see them online. And I feel remiss that I didn't bring any samples of that tonight. That it would have been, here, look at this. But I think you can get a good feel for it online. And so that's that. Poetry. Can you all hear all right? Yeah. Okay, good. I read at Barnes & Noble in the fall, and some of you may have been there, and I think I recognize some of you from that reading. And I'm trying not to repeat too many poems from that, but some of them I will repeat. I'm going to start with the poem that relates to the cover of this book. This is my grandson, who was about 5 months old when this picture was taken. He's underwater. He's in a water babies class. So I'm going to start with that poem, Water Babies. It's from a series of 7 poems. The series is called The 7 Pools, and all the poems are in the same form, and they all take place around swimming pools. So this is Water Babies. What do the babies think as they go under? Their mothers, who would surely walk across the surface of the pool to save them, now smile and coo and dunk them. When the babies come up sputtering, their mothers give them wet kisses, hug them soothingly, and dunk them again. Some of the babies laugh and splash, and some stare up in quiet astonishment, but most of them struggle, pumping their legs the way frogs do, trying to jump. The cries that fly from their wide mouths bounce off the ceiling and fall in a shattered chorus back to the water. The mothers just want their babies to grow up safely. They wrap them in towels, cuddle them, but the babies are learning to hold their breath, as if they might have seen the way their mothers smiled as they pulled them down beneath the surface of their first betrayal. I don't mean to be hard on the mothers. I did that with my son when he was about the same age as my grandson was in his water babies class. My son didn't take to it nearly as well as my grandson did. So, but he was going to be the best baby in that class because I was the only man, So, I don't know, how do we ever get along? Garrison Keillor read 2 of my poems on his Writer's Almanac last summer, and I'm going to read those to you. One of them is also from the 7 Pools, so I'll read that before the other one. The first day. Saturday morning, the pool fills with children. Their parents want them to learn something preposterous, not just to tread water, but to move through it as easily as they run at home from one room to another. Naturally, the miracle of flotation escapes some of them. However, the believers, buoyant in their faith, hold their breath and push away from the side. Face down, arms outstretched, these blessed ones glide like angels in a fleeting state of grace, then pop up grinning when they run out of air. Splashed with success, they hug themselves happily in the blue-lipped chill. Meanwhile, the few still clinging to the wall watch their own numbers shrink, small, miserable, suspicious of their parents for making them suffer here. They begin to see the arrangement of things, how easily everyone can turn away from them when they don't give in, how lonely a personal conviction is. That's a lifelong lesson, man. I was a conscientious objector in the Vietnam War, how lowly a personal conviction is. But there were a lot of us, so it didn't matter. So this is the other poem that Garrison Keillor read. It's called The Business of Crows. One of them has a discarded half-pint milk carton by its pinched top and is banging it on the sidewalk. Hopping with it, dragging it along, he hefts it with his beak and swings it against the concrete. Then he pauses to inspect his work, to adjust his grip before picking up the carton and smacking it down again. Every time he hits the sidewalk with the empty box, it makes a flat, satisfying plop. Perhaps that's all the crow wants, the hollow report he gets for his labor confirming its emptiness. As for me, I have stopped on the way back to my office to watch a crow's involvement with a milk carton. Sunlight filtering through bare trees stains the bird a dark blue that slips to black like secret ink and makes sense only as his feathers move. What could possibly be more important than this? I have no further excuses. I think I told this story at Barnes & Noble, but just after this poem was read on Keillor's program, a friend of mine I've known since college in the 1960s and early 70s, sent me an email saying that he'd heard it and he liked it, but he wanted to know what bear trees were. B-E-A-R, trees. They're good. My wife Marquita and I had the great fortune. I was interested in your poem about traveling across Russia. That same year, we were spending the year in Morocco, 2012, 2013. So 3 years ago, right now, is about the time I wrote the next poem I'm going to read. Marquita was teaching in Marrakesh, Morocco, and the school where she was teaching had given us the use of an apartment in Gurley, which is the Nouvelle Ville, the French part of Marrakesh. And I got to spend my time writing and walking around and meeting people, and it was just, God, it was wonderful. So one day I was sitting in the apartment, and it was hot, and I had the door open, and I had a balcony overlooking the street below, and I heard the sound of somebody using a skill saw, and it bound up, and all of a sudden I wasn't there anymore. I was someplace else. Go back, go back. Whine of my neighbor's power saw cutting, binding a little, bogging down, then biting in again. I can almost smell the sawdust, pungent pine resin or dry walnut lingering, filling the shop. My uncle's voice rising with it from his absence, saying, well, because he always started a sentence like an afterthought, maybe you better measure again. So I have to stop. Here comes the nagging blade of doubt, the same circular reason I've never been able to finish anything. And so with that, I'm going to go back to the previous book. Both of these books are published by Moonpath Press in Kingston, Washington, by Lana Heckman Ayers, who is the best person I've ever worked with in poetry publication. She's just fantastic. And if you get a manuscript together and you want to have somebody give it a really serious look with a good opportunity to publish it, send it to her. You'll find her online, Moonpath Press. So I'm going to read a couple of poems out of this book, maybe 3 of them. Sweating Copper. My father taught me the hard way. Dusty coveralls in the crawl space with the water off, and no matter what, we were stuck there until we finished up. Cobwebs strung the floor joists where I had to aim the trouble light and hold it still so he could see just what the hell was going on. If I let it slip, he grabbed my wrist and dragged the light back where he wanted it, above the tubing cutter and the emery cloth and the little metal-handled flux brush in the jar of flux. The solder wire coiled around itself the way I wrapped my thoughts on their hollow core. Then the quiet hiss of bottled gas, flint scratch of the spark lighter, the blue tongue licking through the flame along the copper pipe to make the solder run bright as mercury into the fitted seam. Smell of cool dirt, smell of coffined air, smell of gas and flux and solder vapor, piercing it all like my father's whisper. Can't you pay attention, maybe, just for once? In my late teens, early 20s, I had, this was Vietnam War years, you know, and I had let my hair get pretty long. It's pretty long gone now, but pretty long. And I had a full beard. And my dad was not at all happy with the way I looked. I rode a motorcycle, and when I'd moved out and lived across town, I'd come home on Sundays for Sunday dinner with my folks. And one Sunday I rode in. It's a nice day, didn't have my helmet on because it was a nice day and I was immortal. And so my hair is like, you know, everywhere. And I walked in, and this was our encounter, at least as I recollect it. It's called Jesus Charles Manson. That hair, he said, that hair and that beard and that look in your eye, he said, and that hair and that trash on your tongue and that beard and those filthy jeans, he said. I wonder just what you think I see when I see you, he said, with that hair and that beard and that look in your eye and those filthy jeans and that trash on your tongue, he said. And by now he was shouting, that greasy hair and that beard and those filthy jeans, I mean Jesus, he said. You look like Charles Manson with that greasy hair and that beard and that look in your eye and those trashy jeans and that filth on your tongue and that look and that trash and that filth and that hair and that beard and those jeans. I mean Jesus, he said. I mean Jesus. As the guy says in the Monty Python routine, we got better. So one more from this book. The Boats in the Harbor. Within an hour after I left her ICU bedside, my mother stopped breathing and her heart quit, and the IV drip had nothing more to do, and the monitor rang for room service, and someone came to turn it off, but that was not me. Because I was eating breakfast in Trinidad at a restaurant overlooking the harbor, where a fishing boat emerged from the fog like a dim thought forming itself into an idea. My father had said Mom needed to rest after the operation, and I should eat something before I started the long drive north. He liked this restaurant. He was picking up the check. Neither of us would ever see my mother again after that, but we didn't know it at the time. Seagulls wheeled up from their sullen posture on the dock to greet the boat with a noisy chorus of sharp cries and squawks. Critics everywhere, I said, meaning the way the birds received this newly formed idea. But my father didn't get it. To him the seagulls were simply hungry seagulls, and the boat was only a white trawler with a wide blue stripe above the rough strake, where the crew had hung a collection of bright orange fenders to take up the impact of coming home. In the afterlife, let your name be smoke. It will be smoke anyway soon enough, and after that, let your name be ash. Let wind spread your name. Let wind make you famous among the innumerable particles of dust. Then let rain come. Let rain turn your name to mud. Let mud be your name like your mother said it would be if you didn't behave, if you didn't do what she said. Let her say this isn't exactly what she meant. There are a number of elegies in this book. I've gotten to an age where, well, I've been writing a lot of elegies. So I'll just read you one of them. The Tourists. Because it is a country most of us visit only rarely, we will never be fluent in the language of grief. We speak haltingly and often have to excuse ourselves, saying, sorry, sorry, what else can we do? Whenever we go there, although we know we've packed more than we need, we refuse to let anyone carry our luggage. In the streets, we clutch new souvenirs like wounds, as if letting go of them, even briefly, would ruin us. But no one else is going to want what we've bought. No one is going to pick our pockets. Wherever we walk, even crossing the piazza, we find ourselves alone, the architecture foreign, the buildings all painted the same conservative shades as the shirts of undertakers. We're always getting lost. And when we come back home again, none of our friends will ask to see our photographs. Instead, they'll want to try out the few clumsy words they can remember from their own trips across that border. I haven't read this poem much in public, but I think it's time. This is called After the Fire. One of my graduate school mentors was a man named Robert Huff. Do you know him? Bob Huff? He was in Bellingham. Bob was a formidable formal poet. He wrote lovely, subtle, rhymed, metered verse, and on the whole it didn't take with me, except the sounds of words, working together, and the rhythms of it working together. I didn't like being locked into a form particularly, although I do write some of it, and some of it's in here. Anyway, he was not only an excellent poet, but also an excellent drunk. And eventually, after he'd left teaching, he passed out in a chair with a cigarette in his hand and died in a fire. I learned of it when I arrived in Ireland on the doorstep of another friend's place, a mutual friend, and Knut informed me of Bob's death, and I carried that around with me a long time, and this poem's about carrying it. This is called After the Fire, and it starts with an epigraph from one of Robert's poems. I wake up in my dream, I'm wide awake, asleep on Outer Drive. I don't want to think of him waking up in a flaming chair, in a fiery shawl, howling. God, that man could roar. I can hear him still over whiskey, through his smoke, bellowing across my kitchen table. You think that's poetry? Then quoting Auden, how the old masters were never wrong, shoving me into the way that poem worked, stuffing his mouth with the salmon I had cooked, the beans I'd picked and snapped that afternoon. He could move with the sympathetic rhythms of birds, their migratory flights, their seasonal habits, winging it from wreck to wreck, one poem to another, one allusion to the next, playing his tricks of the mouth on the ear, playing paradox, waking in a dream or wide awake, sleeping off something in his blood. The last time I saw him, I left him there for good. And when I heard of the dropped cigarette, the burning chair, his dying in the fire, I felt like a traitor. I took the news away to Inishir, where miles of dry stone walls divide the island into tiny farm plots, tracing the contours of rock and rift and local economy. There I walked the Borines all day and never saw anyone farming. Still, everywhere I went, those walls, their curious order, even the weeds between them said someone had been there working, making sense. A Morocco poem, Dra'a Valley Cemetery. The Dra'a Valley is an oasis valley on in the Sahara. The Sahara just is on the southeastern side of the Atlas Mountains. And like other places of its kind in Morocco, the buildings all look like they've just been extruded from the ground. And in fact, they have been. They've been made from bricks made out of the earth. It's sort of like making adobe. And so they're all the same color as the ground around them, you know, and they immediately start deteriorating back into it. So there's this real organic look about it. Dra'a Valley Cemetery. Pounded flat by habit, a narrow path leaves a pile of houses pulled from the ground, brick on brick and crumbling back since the day they were made. Beyond the last wall, sharp stones mark the ends of graves as if to say, dry loss makes plain sorrow harder. Whatever grows there grows thorns, comes bent from the seed, endures because it must. Because there is no real comfort in a coffin. Because there is no coffin at all, just someone wound in a shroud carried out from the town. Parched air hovers around the graves, and hoopoes probe the dirt between stones, stop and hold, then flash black wing stripes, bright top knots into the green relief of the palmery across the road. Its irrigated shade, new wheat coming up beneath the trees. Whatever you thought you were made of was never meant to last. I'm going to read the closing sequence of this book. I was going to read a few more poems, but I think I'm going on a little bit too long, so I'm going to just go to the end and read the closing sequence. And I know you didn't get this at our Barnes & Noble because I didn't think it would go over very well there.
Expletives?
Pardon me?
Expletives?
Yeah, there is one. Just one. This is all, it starts, this sequence begins with some references to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and an opening epigraph from the Encyclopedia Britannica in 1959 that was my main reference for many years. This is called The Boys, and the epigraph is this: Hiroshima is famous all over Japan for its association with the neighboring islet of Itakoshima, Island of Light. The Boys. We dropped our little boy off, and an island of light fell on the city. It flashed our enemies into light as well, or turned them to ash, or cooked and skinned them alive, left them trailing the ribbons of their faces as they ran, panicked, through their ruined streets. We'd given him our blessing, and we'd let him fly or fall on his own. He was a huge success. So we sent his fat brother down right away to spread the same light in another place. Oh, those two boys had a promise so bright it blinded us. I haven't noticed this for some years, but used to be that on Hiroshima Day every year there would be people who would do crime scene chalk outlines of bodies on the sidewalk. Maybe they do that in Vancouver. That would be a great thing to do downtown here, you know, on Hiroshima Day. So this poem refers to that. The Hiroshima Day sidewalk silhouettes. This could be anyone spread out here flat as a map, a Rorschach blot, a thought gelling into a continent. White chalk. I think of how it powders your fingers, sucks the moisture out of your skin, the dry whisper it makes, thin squeal of nails, quick shiver telegraphed, tooth to spine. This could be anyone flattened here, blasted down to shadow. So why am I drawn to look again each time I turn away? No matter what I know, somebody knows it better. Neutrons, electrons, the hot rods in the containment shell, geologic faults, cracked concrete, this chalk drawing on it, harmless as hopscotch now in the part of the world I walk around in. Two more poems, and before I read them, I want to thank you again for listening. You're a great audience, and this is a great space to read in. And you know, 2 poetry series in one round. What's going on here? This is too much. It's great. I love it. This poem draws on a painting by Ricker Windsor, who used to live in Tacoma. We used to try to collaborate and did some. And Ricker now lives in Indonesia, and we correspond some back and forth. So this is the painting that this draws on. It has some archers shooting arrows into a river, and there are bodies in the river. Okay. These others, the men in the river, the men who had been standing on the bank before they dove into the blue dream of history, all tried to save themselves. All scattered when the others attacked them, when the others covered them in a furious swarm of arrows. But no matter where they ran, these men on the bank of the river, they ran toward more arrows. And no matter how they swam, these men in the river, they had to come up for air. And when they opened their mouths, they opened their mouths to arrows. When the others were finished, they lowered their bows. When they finished, they had arrows to spare, each with its point hidden in the quiver, its fletched end ready as a winged idea. When they finished, they praised what they had done, and then they said it had to be. When they finished, they praised what they had done. They said it had to be, and then they sat down to eat. Or they drank till they were drunk, or they found someone to fuck, or they prayed, they gave thanks to one god or another. These others, with their arrows. Resolution. Afterward, the crows perching in the bare orchard rattled black vowels, broken consonants from their feathered bags as if they'd seen all there was to see, had said so over and over. The old complaints, grown heavy, overripe, had dropped. New recruits stooped, picked them up. Eager to begin, optimistic as saints, they said surely the worst was over, but no. It would start again the same way for them. Let them have it. Let them be among the lucky. Let their dead give up their tongues. Let the last owl in the dry brown woods keep calling out the same hollow vowels all night long. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Joseph Green, who will be here during the break to sign books. There are 2 books for sale up here. Tony and Leah will help you out with that. We really hope that everyone comes back for the second half of the open mic, but if you cannot join us, the next one will be on April 14th, and there are some flyers at the back, as well as a place where you can give us your email if you'd like to receive notices about future events. So let's hear one more time for Joseph Green. So 15 minutes that you can buy some books and get some food and drink.